Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I've always loved parties. There's something about watching people laugh, connect, and lose themselves in joy that makes me feel deeply alive, like I belong, like I matter. So when my birthday rolled around that year, I was determined to make it special, not just for me, but for everyone. I planned a game night, a cozy family gathering with food, music, and lighthearted fun, something to lift us all, especially after everything we'd been through. The night started off quietly. My dad, my younger sister Lori, Grandma, and a few cousins came over. It wasn't a huge bash, but it felt right, warm. After Mom's accident a few months prior, it was the first time any of us had tried to celebrate anything. We were all still navigating the silence her absence left behind, each of us clinging to moments that could make us forget, even briefly. The backyard was decorated with balloons, bright yellows, blues, and pinks. Lori helped hang fairy lights along the fence. There was a small inflatable pool for the little kids, and bowls of chips, cookies, and soda lined every table. I remember standing there just before sunset, watching everyone laugh and talk and thinking, maybe this is what healing looks like. That night I went to bed feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. I closed my eyes with a full heart, thinking everything might actually be okay. The next morning, sunlight poured in early through the blinds. Dad had left for work already, and I wanted to surprise him by cleaning up the mess before he got home. I knew he'd be exhausted, and the last thing he needed was to trip over plastic cups and tangled streamers. Lori took charge of the dishes while I went out to the patio to take down decorations. Most of the balloons had already shriveled overnight, sagging into sad, rubbery blobs on the grass. But one balloon caught my eye. It hovered near the ceiling of the patio, untouched, fully inflated, and a dull gray that didn't match anything else we had bought. Our theme had been bright, joyful colors. This thing looked wrong, almost dusty, like it didn't belong. At first I brushed it off, just a rogue leftover, maybe from a neighbor's party. But the longer I stared at it, the more uneasy I felt. It wasn't just out of place. It felt aware, like it was watching me. I tried to laugh at myself. It's just a balloon, get a grip. But the pit in my stomach wouldn't go away, so I picked up a handful of small stones from the edge of the garden and started throwing them, trying to knock it down. Then came the sound, a loud, splintering crack. Before I could react, the wooden beam above me gave out with a thunderous groan. I jumped back instinctively as the porch roof collapsed in front of me, sending up a cloud of dust and debris. "Grandma!" I heard Lori scream from behind me. Time slowed. Through the settling dust, I saw her, Grandma, lying beneath the fallen beam, completely still. Her eyes were closed. Blood ran down her temple. I ran to her, heart racing, screaming her name, hoping, praying, that she'd open her eyes, say something, anything. But she didn't move. I dropped to my knees, hands trembling, not knowing what to do when I heard Lori's frantic voice behind me. "Call someone, call an ambulance." Then we both froze. Dad was standing in the doorway, grocery bags at his feet, his face frozen in disbelief. For a moment he didn't move. Then he rushed forward and dropped to Grandma's side. I had never seen him cry like that, not even after Mom's accident. His sobs were raw, broken. I wanted to speak, to say I was sorry, but my throat felt like it was closing in on itself. I looked up at the porch ceiling, searching for that balloon. But it was gone. I couldn't explain it, but deep down, I knew. It had something to do with this. That gray balloon. It wasn't just a balloon. The ambulance came, but there was nothing they could do. The coroner said it was instant. Quick. I wanted to believe that. The days that followed were a blur. Lori barely spoke, 16 years old, and she'd lost Mom and Grandma in the same year. I tried to hold it together for her, pretending I was okay, even when I wasn't. I made sure she ate, got to school, tried to laugh at her jokes, but sometimes I'd catch her staring into space, eyes empty. That haunted look never left. A few days later, while Dad and I were out clearing the broken pieces of the porch, trying to piece back some kind of normal, I saw it again. The balloon, hovering just above the fence in broad daylight, gray, perfectly still, as if it had been waiting. That was when I saw it. The damn balloon. No longer stuck on the ceiling, it was drifting lazily through the hallway like it owned the place. It shouldn't have been there. It couldn't have been there. But it was. Gliding silently past the family photos on the wall like a ghost that knew us intimately. A surge of rage took over me. I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. That thing had been hovering over everything since the night of the party like a parasite. I couldn't let it stay. I grabbed a kitchen knife without thinking and followed it up the stairs. The hallway was quiet except for the soft creaking of the old wooden floorboards under my feet. As I passed Lori's door, I noticed it was shut. The balloon, though, had disappeared around the corner. How the hell did it get in there? And then I heard it, Lori scream. My blood ran cold. I threw the door open, heart pounding, and froze. Lori was on the floor, convulsing violently. An exposed wire from her bedside lamp was sparking like mad, a current snapping through the air and licking at her t-shirt. The fabric had already started to burn. I could smell the scorched cotton and skin before I could fully process what was happening. I dropped to my knees and tried to pull her away, but the shock jolted through my arms. Panicked, I grabbed the blanket off her bed, wrapped it around my hands, and used it to smother the sparks and drag her away from the wire. When the flames were finally out, I leaned in to check if she was breathing. She wasn't. My heart was pounding so loudly I barely heard Dad shouting as he ran into the room. I looked up, numb, unable to say anything. He froze at the sight of Lori's body, then fell to his knees beside her, sobbing and trying CPR. I stood there, helpless, hollow. But my eyes drifted to the hallway again. It was there. The balloon. It hovered just beyond the doorway like it had been watching. Like it had waited for the exact moment to strike. And now, it was floating slowly down the stairs, following my dad. My stomach twisted. That thing wasn't done yet. I took off after it, still clutching the knife. I didn't care how ridiculous it looked. I knew that if I didn't stop it, it would take him too. "Dad, get away from it," I yelled, but he didn't hear me. Before I could reach him, the balloon drifted beside him, and then, with a gust that came from nowhere, pushed against him. I watched, horrified, as he lost his balance. He tumbled down the stairs, limbs flailing, body hitting each step with a sickening thud. When I reached him at the bottom, he was twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood seeped from the back of his head. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. Something inside me snapped. I looked up. The balloon hovered at the top of the stairs, motionless, mocking me. "You want me?" I growled through clenched teeth. "Come and get me." I stormed back up the stairs, chasing it as it floated into my room, my sanctuary. It was waiting, pressed against the ceiling, just like the first day I'd seen it on the porch. I grabbed a chair and climbed up, knife gripped tight in one hand. My heart pounded like a war drum. But as I lunged upward, the chair wobbled. My foot slipped. The next thing I knew, pain exploded in my head as it hit the edge of my dresser. Then, blackness. When I woke up, I was strapped to a stretcher on the porch. Blinking against the sunlight, I saw flashing lights. 2 police officers stood in front of me. Behind them, a forensic team moved in and out of the house. 2 body bags were being rolled out. I started crying the second I realized what that meant. My sister. My father. Gone. One of the officers crouched beside me. His face was hard to read, part concern, part suspicion. "Can you tell us what happened?" So I told them. All of it. The balloon. How it moved on its own. How it caused the fire, the fall, the deaths. I told them about the way it followed us, how it was there every time something terrible happened. They exchanged a glance. Then one of them stood and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Please don't resist. They didn't believe me. I must have explained myself 100 times since then. But it doesn't matter. No one believes in haunted balloons. No one believes in things they can't see. They said I was the one responsible, not just for what happened that week, but even for my mom's death. They claimed I tampered with her car, that I cut the brakes, that when she tried to stop on a steep hill she couldn't, and crashed into a tree. They said I planned all of it. But they're wrong. I didn't hurt anyone. I loved my family. I just couldn't stop it. Now I'm in a mental health facility. I get therapy twice a week. I'm kept separate from the other patients. My psychiatrist tells me I have paranoid schizophrenia, that the balloon was a manifestation of my trauma, a symbol of guilt or fear, some nonsense like that. But I know what I saw. The reason I'm telling you all this is because it didn't happen to me, not directly. It happened to my cousin Arnold. Everything I just told you, it's his story. He told me all of it when I visited him in the asylum, where he's been held since 2016. That same week he killed his grandmother, his sister, and his father. And later investigators discovered he had cut the brakes on his mother's car, leading to her death. When I heard his story, the balloon, the way he described it, the obsession, I felt a chill crawl down my spine. It sounded insane. But the way he told it, the conviction in his voice, I don't know. Sometimes when I close my eyes at night, I think about that gray balloon, and I wonder what would happen if it ever came looking for me. It was a typical afternoon at the conservatory, just 1 week before our end-of-semester recital. You could feel the tension radiating off the walls like static electricity. Everyone was on edge, tired, jittery, and hyper-focused. Rehearsal time with Professor Adams, our violin instructor, was always intense, but something about that day felt different. He hadn't even arrived yet, and already the air was thick with anxiety. God, I feel like I'm going to throw up, Anna muttered, half laughing but clearly not joking. She clutched her violin like a shield. I know, I said, trying to sound calm. Feels like we're marching into battle, not rehearsal. Matt was pacing near the windows, running scales under his breath. Jack sat stiffly on the edge of a chair, plucking open strings, his eyes darting toward the clock. Adams had a reputation. A brilliant musician, no doubt, but his temper was legendary. He wasn't just demanding, he was brutal when he thought you weren't living up to your potential. His critiques had reduced people to tears before. We all respected him, maybe even feared him a little. Okay, more than a little. When he finally walked in, the door slammed shut so hard the windows rattled. No hello, no preamble, just the storm. What the hell is wrong with you people today? He barked. You think that was good? That was garbage. Utter garbage. We froze. Not even the usual nervous chuckles or apologies. Something in his tone told us not to push it. He stood at the front of the room, scanning us like a hawk choosing which prey to strike. I swear you're wasting my time, he growled. Do you even care about this performance? Do any of you care about the music? No one dared answer, not a single word. Even breathing felt like a risk. He started pacing, sharp strides echoing off the walls, his eyes darting between us. Then he stopped in front of Anna. You, play the opening section. Her fingers trembled as she lifted her violin. I saw her swallow hard. The first few notes came out fine, tentative but in tune. Then her bow slipped. A screech. A mistake. Adams exploded. Pathetic? That's what you bring after 3 months of rehearsals? Start again. Anna blinked fast, fighting tears. She tried again, but her hands were shaking too much. The sound came out jagged, unsteady. She faltered. Stopped. Adams exhaled sharply and turned to Matt. Maybe one of you is worth a damn. Your turn." Matt froze, fingers clenching around his bow. You could practically see the battle going on in his head. Run or play. He lifted his violin with a shaky breath. His tone was stronger than Anna's, more confident at first, but he missed a shift, a big one. The wrong note rang out like a gunshot. The baton in Adam's hand cracked like a whip against the piano. Split in two. "Enough," he shouted, voice raw. "You're all useless. Completely fucking useless." No one spoke. No one moved. The silence that followed was crushing. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. But then, he did something that tore the fabric of our reality. Without a word, Adams reached into his battered leather bag. What he pulled out made time stop. A revolver. Real, heavy, cold. He laid it on the music stand with eerie calm. "If you don't take this seriously," he said, voice low and terrifyingly measured, "I'll make sure you rehearse until you understand the real consequences of failure." Our blood ran cold. "What the hell?" Jack stammered, his voice cracking. Are you joking, Professor?" We all turned to Adams. His eyes were locked on Jack, unblinking, cold, empty. "No," he said, "just that one word." And that's when we knew. He wasn't bluffing. "Just take your instruments and play." Adams hissed through clenched teeth, his grip tightening around the gun like it was an extension of himself. We moved like puppets, slow, shaking, barely breathing, as we lifted our violins and bows. I could barely hold mine steady. The room was dead silent except for the rustle of trembling hands and the faint creak of chairs shifting. And there he stood, watching, gun in hand, eyes wild and bloodshot, pacing like a predator waiting to pounce. We began the piece. Each note felt like it was being torn from my fingers. My heart beat so hard I couldn't tell if I was hearing the metronome in my head or the sound of impending death. The gun's barrel caught the light occasionally, flashing at us like a warning. Every tiny mistake, every squeak, every missed shift was met with an eruption of fury. "What the hell was that?" Adams barked when Jack's bow hit the string wrong. Then came the click of the gun's safety. Just a tiny sound, but it echoed louder than anything we played. "Do it again and you'll be sorry," he snarled, raising the gun and pointing it directly at Jack. We froze, all of us, like statues carved from fear. Jack stood there, bow midair, eyes wide and fixed on the barrel inches from his chest. No one breathed, no one dared. Then, something snapped. Anna, silent until now, suddenly moved with terrifying speed. She gripped the heavy metal music stand next to her and hurled it like a spear. It crashed into Adams's arm with a sharp metallic clang, sending the gun spinning across the room. "Go!" she shouted. Jack lunged forward, diving for the gun, but Adams wasn't done. He roared and slammed into Jack, knocking him down. The two of them grappled on the floor, limbs flailing, teeth bared. It was primal, desperate. I stood frozen, paralyzed for a second. Then my instincts kicked in. I raised my violin, my precious, beloved violin, and brought it down with everything I had onto Adams's back. The wood splintered with a sickening crack. Adams let out a howl of pain. That gave Jack just enough time. He rolled, grabbed the gun, and scrambled to his feet, pointing it straight at Adams's chest, breathing hard. "Stay down!" Jack screamed. "Don't make me use this!" Adam staggered to his feet, his face contorted with rage and humiliation like a demon dragged into daylight. "You'll pay for that," he hissed, voice dripping venom. "No," Jack said, the gun unwavering. "We're done listening to you." Silence followed. The only sounds were our ragged breathing and the distant hum of a vending machine in the hall. Anna, hands trembling, pulled out her phone and called 911. Her voice cracked as she spoke, but she got the words out. The rest of us just stood there shaking, broken, waiting. The police arrived within minutes. They came in shouting, guns raised, but Adams didn't resist. He just smiled, as they cuffed him. His eyes locked with mine as they let him out, burning with something between hatred and complete madness. We collapsed into each other once the squad car pulled away. Jack was still gripping the gun when an officer gently pried it from his hand. We were crying before we realized it. Anna, Matt, Jack, me. Uncontrolled, ugly sobs. "What the hell was that?" Matt whispered, as if saying it aloud might help make sense of it. The investigation came quickly. It turned out Adams's life had imploded in recent months. A divorce. He'd lost custody of his children. Disciplinary issues at the school had quietly piled up. That morning he showed up under the influence of something, drugs, maybe alcohol, and carrying a loaded weapon, as if he'd already decided nothing mattered anymore. The conservatory tried to sweep it under the rug. They framed it as a personal crisis, a tragic breakdown, and pleaded with us not to speak to the press. But of course, the truth leaked out. Whispers became stories, stories became headlines, and Adams's career, his reputation, crumbled into dust. We were given a break, a few weeks to recover. Matt and Anna came back eventually. Somehow, they found the strength. Jack and I didn't. I tried. I really did. But every time I picked up my violin, I saw his face. I heard the click of the safety. I felt that old fear gripping my spine. The music didn't come back. Only the panic did. I dropped out. Quietly. I packed my things, left the conservatory, and never looked back. Music had been my life. It had been everything. But now it was a haunted house I couldn't enter without the ghosts grabbing my throat. Years passed, but the trauma stayed. It lived in the shadows of my thoughts, curled up like something waiting to pounce again. I still have nightmares sometimes, dreams where I'm back in that room and he's standing there, gun in hand, telling us to play or die. Sometimes when I'm alone, I wonder what would have happened if Anna hadn't moved, if she hadn't acted. Would he have shot us? I don't know, but when I remember the look in his eyes, the fury, the emptiness, I'm almost certain he would have. That morning I was sitting on a chaotic pile of clothes in the corner of my room, my head buried deep into the sheets. Not because I was upset or tired or thinking about anything in particular. It was just comfortable. That position let me shut everything out. If I kept my face hidden, I didn't have to see anyone's expression, their fake, polite smiles, or the way their eyes flickered with silent judgment. Every time I did look up, I regretted it. People never said anything outright, but you could feel it. That spark in their eyes, the look that lingers a second too long. I've never been what you'd call good-looking. My face has been a battlefield of acne for as long as I can remember, and the social anxiety just made everything worse. School, parties, even going to the store felt like I was stepping into a spotlight. I became the punchline of jokes, whispers behind lockers, or glances exchanged during lunch breaks. It didn't take much to realize I didn't fit in. Then there was a knock on my door. I ignored it. Whoever it was, I didn't care. The last thing I wanted to do was talk. Talking was exhausting. The idea of having to put on some kind of mask just to have a conversation felt like too much. I stayed quiet, hoping they'd go away. But the knock came again. Then again. Finally, the door creaked open. I didn't even lift my head. "Didn't you hear me calling you?" my mom said, that note of impatience in her voice. "Sorry, Mom, I was busy," I muttered, still buried in the sheets. She sighed and waved her hand toward the room. "Look around. Seriously, look at this mess." I peeked out, annoyed. The place looked like a tornado had hit it. Clothes everywhere, half-packed bags, wrappers, and forgotten notebooks scattered across the floor. That's when it hit me. We were supposed to be leaving for the road trip. Dad was driving, and Mom had said she'd take over if he got tired. We were supposed to be on the road already. "Come on, pack your stuff. Let's go," she said firmly. For the first time that day, I actually looked at her. Her face didn't look like everyone else's. There wasn't judgment in her eyes, no pretense, just love, unfiltered, patient, unwavering. It hit me like a punch in the chest. Maybe she was the only one in the world who saw me and didn't flinch. "Okay," I said softly, pushing myself off the mountain of clothes. Within 20 minutes, I had everything packed and rolled my suitcase downstairs. As I stepped out the door, Dad looked at my bag and raised an eyebrow. "That thing's too big," he grunted. I didn't answer, just hauled it toward the trunk and wedged it in, ignoring the resistance. Then I climbed into the back seat. Dad was already behind the wheel, Mom settling in beside him. As soon as the doors shut, he threw the car into gear and we were off. I turned and stared at the house shrinking in the distance until it finally disappeared behind the trees. Inside the car, Dad was blasting country music. Not the soft, melancholy kind either, the twangy, upbeat stuff. He started singing along, loud and off-key. His voice cut through the static of the radio like a knife. I couldn't decide what annoyed me more, him or the song. Every so often, Mom would glance back at me with a soft smile, the kind that said, "You okay, kiddo?" And even though I didn't smile back, something inside me loosened each time. The hours dragged by. The sun dipped low, bathing the sky in orange before slipping into a blanket of black. My eyelids began to grow heavier, the vibration of the car humming like a lullaby. I tried to fight it at first, tried to keep watching the road signs blur by, but sleep always wins. Eventually, I gave in. I must have slept for 5 hours. When I woke up, everything was still. The car had stopped. We were parked in front of a small, old roadside motel, the kind with flickering neon signs and only one story of rooms, doors lined up like teeth. Outside, the world had turned to darkness. The only sounds were the soft chorus of night creatures, crickets, owls, and something else. Unfamiliar noises I couldn't place, whispering just beyond the tree line. We all got out of the car. While my parents went inside to talk to the clerk, I made my way to the trunk, pulled out my bag. "You don't have to carry that in, you know. It's safe in the car," Mom said when she saw me. I gave her a small smile, didn't say anything, just kept dragging the suitcase behind me. A few minutes later, we were inside our motel room. It was simple. Faded wallpaper, 2 beds with itchy-looking covers, a small TV that looked like it hadn't been turned on in a decade. But I didn't care. I couldn't stop smiling. From ear to ear, I was buzzing with anticipation, because this night, this place, was exactly what I had been waiting for. Everything I had planned for years, every detail, every thought, was finally going to be set in motion. I dragged my suitcase across the carpeted motel floor, its wheels catching on the uneven threads. The room was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioner rattling in the corner. My parents were in the other room, maybe already asleep. The lamp beside the bed cast a yellow glow, just enough for me to see what I needed. I unzipped the suitcase slowly, savoring the familiar scent of plastic and fabric. And then, as the lid flopped open, they stared up at me, my dolls. Their painted eyes and frozen smiles. I felt something tighten in my chest, not fear, not guilt, something warmer, comfort, like they were the only ones who understood me, because they never judged, they never looked away. They couldn't talk, of course, but they listened. They watched. That was enough. I reached in and pulled out the first one. Her name had faded from memory, if she'd ever had one. She wore a faded blue dress, and her hair was matted from years of handling. I laid her gently on the floor, then opened the small black pouch of tools I kept tucked beneath my clothes. Scissors, tape, a scalpel. Each piece gleamed like it was eager to help. "Don't worry," I whispered. "This won't take long." I pried her mouth open wide, the plastic creaking slightly, and slid my fingers in. My hands were steady, always steady. I took the scalpel and sliced away the tongue. A useless thing. She didn't need it. Then I pressed a strip of black tape firmly across her lips. Silence was better. A strange calm settled over me as I worked. I clipped off her fingers one by one, arranging them neatly beside her like fallen petals. My eyes roamed her stiff little body, searching for more imperfections. Finally, they landed on her eyes. I laughed quietly as I scooped them from their sockets, each one popping free with a satisfying snap. Then I took the scalpel and shaved her head clean. The hair came off in wisps, floating to the floor like strands of old memories. When I finished, I stepped back and admired the work. She didn't look like she had before. She looked better. A smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. Beautiful. She was finally beautiful. I turned back to the suitcase and reached for the second doll. He was different, more rigid, newer maybe. I wanted him to see what I had done, to learn from it. But something in his expression, something in those lifeless plastic eyes, bothered me. "I'm trying to help you," I said softly, almost pleading. "I'm a surgeon. I make things better." I laid him on the floor and made the first incision down his stomach. The skin parted easily. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I'd find it. I sewed him up neatly, then turned to his fingers. One by one, I clipped them shorter, more delicate, more appropriate. But his face, God, I hated that face. I leaned in, eyes narrowed. "This won't hurt," I promised, though I wasn't sure he cared. I sliced off his nose and set it beside him. Then I removed his ears. They didn't matter. He didn't need to hear what the world had to say. I flipped him over and began working on his legs, detaching each one and swapping them. Right leg on the left leg on the right. I sewed them back on, tighter this time. More secure. His fingers were still too long, so I took the knife again and trimmed them down to the knuckles. That's how it should be. Then I noticed the light. The sun was rising, soft golden rays creeping through the window and falling across the motel floor. It lit up my workspace like a spotlight, revealing every stitch, every incision. I stood in the middle of it all, dolls disassembled, tools scattered, my hands streaked with plastic shavings and dried glue, and I smiled. I had done well. A knock broke the silence. Annoyed, I didn't answer. But the door creaked open anyway. My father stood there, the doorway framing him like a judge at the end of a trial. He didn't say anything at first, just stared. His face was pale, his lips tight, his eyes darting across the floor. At the dolls, the tools, the open suitcase. "Pack your things," he said flatly. "We have to go." His voice cracked a little at the end. I could see something behind his eyes. Fear, maybe. Disappointment. Confusion. Outside the room, I heard him whisper to my mother. "He needs to go back to rehab." "He was just playing with toys," she said softly, almost defensively. "Did you see what he did to those toys? He's 20 years old. That's not playing. That's wrong. He needs help." Their voices faded, but their words stuck. I sat quietly, watching my father. He thought I was broken, that I was the one who needed fixing. But what about him? His heart, it was hideous. Cold. Cruel. It needed work. And I knew how to fix things. I was a surgeon after all. I packed my things without a word, like Mom asked, and slid back into the car. On the drive home, I sat in silence, staring at the back of my father's head. It pulsed slightly with every heartbeat. I could almost see the problem there, buried deep beneath skin and bone. I imagined peeling it back, reshaping it, making him whole, making him kind. I could help him. I could. That night, after Mom left for her hospital shift, I waited. When the house was quiet and still, I crept into my parents' room. My tools were ready. I whispered apologies. I told him it would all be okay. That when it was over, he'd be better. The surgery didn't go quite as planned. I tried my best. I really did. But sometimes even the best surgeons lose a patient. Mom came home and found him. I think something in her changed that night. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just moved. She buried him quietly, out back, with the help of some distant relatives. No questions, no explanations. 5 years have passed since then. This nursing home is where I live now. They don't call it a prison, but it feels like one. The walls are soft, the windows don't open, and the lights are always on. Mom hasn't visited once, and that's what hurts the most. Because for a long time I thought she loved me, thought she loved. I missed my old boss again. It wasn't the first time he'd kept me working late, but it was the first time I chose to walk home instead of calling for a ride. Not that I had much of a choice. My phone was down to 5% battery, and the rideshare apps were glitching. It was cold out, the kind of cold that nips at your fingertips and seeps through your coat, reminding you in a quiet, cruel way that you're alive and exposed. The streets were mostly empty. The occasional car passed, headlights sweeping across the cracked pavement like watchful eyes. My apartment was about a 30-minute walk, which didn't thrill me, but I figured if I stuck to the main roads and avoided the alleys, I'd be fine. Still, the night felt off. The streetlights flickered like they were struggling to stay awake. Everything was a little too quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't sit right in your gut. No sirens, no dogs barking, just the wind and my own footsteps. About 10 minutes in, I saw someone. He was on the opposite sidewalk, walking toward me with his hood down. He wasn't moving fast, just this slow, deliberate pace like he had nowhere to be, and all the time in the world to get there. There was something about him I couldn't place. Not threatening exactly, but wrong. Like his rhythm didn't match the rest of the world. I tried to shake it off. Then I crossed the street. Not obviously. I pretended to check my phone, looked both ways like I had somewhere else to be, and casually switched sidewalks. But even as I tried to play it cool, my eyes kept flicking back to him. He never changed his pace. Didn't even turn his head. But I felt his gaze. Deep down, in that primitive part of the brain that just knows when you're being watched. My pulse picked up. I turned down a side street. Shortcut to get home quicker, I told myself. It wasn't a great idea, but I needed to put distance between me and that guy. The street narrowed into an alley, winding like a snake. It wasn't completely dark. Some broken lights flickered above, casting a sickly yellow glow. But it wasn't comforting either. The walls were tight, the shadows thicker. Still, I kept walking. I thought it would lead me back to a main road. Instead, it twisted and split off again and again. Left, then right, then another right. A concrete labyrinth. I stopped to check my phone. Dead. Completely black screen. I couldn't even retrace my steps. I had no idea how far I'd come. Every turn felt like I was getting deeper, not closer to home. I pressed on, hoping for a street lamp, a sign, a glimpse of something familiar. But the alley kept going. The air was damp and heavy, like the walls themselves were breathing, and I swear it started to feel smaller, like it was closing in. Then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, not mine. I froze. The sound stopped too. I spun around. Nothing. Just shadows and flickering light. I squinted into the darkness, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Nothing moved. No sign of anyone. But I knew someone was there. I forced myself to keep going. My legs were heavy, like each step cost more than the last. But then the footsteps returned, closer, louder, matching my pace. I stopped again. They stopped. My breath hitched, shallow, uneven. I turned slowly, scanning every corner, and that's when I saw him. He stood just beyond the circle of dim light, tall, motionless, watching. At first I thought it was the same guy from before, but then the details started to click in the worst way. His skin, if you could call it that, was pale, almost glowing, not just light-skinned, colorless, like he'd never been touched by the sun. He was towering, well over 2 meters, and thin, limbs too long, like they'd been stretched. He didn't move. He just stood there, I couldn't see his face clearly, but I felt his eyes on me. Not just watching, studying, like he was deciding something. My whole body locked up, paralyzed by something deeper than fear. And then I ran. I didn't think, didn't look back at first, just tore down the alley, dodging puddles, my lungs burning with cold air. My shoes slapped against the pavement, echoing like gunshots. But no matter how fast I went, that feeling, that he was behind me, never left. And when I did look back, I saw I wasn't imagining it. He was closer. He wasn't running, wasn't even walking fast. But somehow, he was gaining. His movements were wrong, fluid and jerky at the same time, like he didn't have bones, like the rules of physics didn't apply to him. My legs felt like they were filled with lead. I couldn't stop, couldn't breathe. Every corner I turned felt like the alley was growing narrower, squeezing me in. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. My throat was dry, locked tight. I stumbled around a wet corner and almost slipped, catching myself against the damp brick wall. My palms scraped, but I barely felt it. I turned to look again. He was there, closer now, his head tilted slightly, like he was curious, and his face, if it was a face, was wrong. Smooth, featureless, like someone had started sculpting it and then quit halfway. Just the faintest hints of where eyes or a mouth might be, but nothing complete, nothing human. My heart was in overdrive. Only adrenaline kept me upright. I staggered forward again, legs screaming, lungs ready to give out. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Because whatever that thing was, it wasn't just following me. It was toying with me. I turned the next corner, lungs burning, only to freeze in place. This couldn't be right. The narrow walls, the broken window, the graffiti-stained dumpster, I'd already passed them. It was the same corner. Somehow, impossibly, I was looping, running in circles like a rat in a maze designed to trap, not free. Then I heard it. A sound that defied classification. Low and guttural, vibrating through the alley walls like it came from beneath the concrete itself. It wasn't a growl. It wasn't a voice either. It was something else. Something wrong. The moment it reached my ears, my skin crawled, every hair standing on end. It sounded like it was enjoying this. I collapsed to my knees. My legs simply gave out, trembling from fear and exhaustion. My chest heaved, desperate for air that suddenly felt thinner, colder. I was suffocating, not just from panic, but from the presence I knew was drawing closer. Then I felt it. The temperature around me plummeted, like I'd been dropped into ice water. My breath came out in visible puffs and my fingers started to numb. I didn't want to look up. I was too scared of what I'd see, but I knew hiding was useless now. I forced myself to stand, legs shaking beneath me. My hand reached out blindly and landed on a broken metal pipe half buried under a pile of wet cardboard. I grabbed it. It was cold and slick, but it felt like something. I needed something. I turned to face it. It was there, standing just a few steps away, still and crooked like it was leaning in to study me. Its towering frame looked almost amused, as if it had been waiting for this moment, for me to stop running. I raised the pipe with both hands, trembling so badly it clanged against the brick wall as I lifted it. "Stay back," I choked out, my voice breaking into a whisper. "Just stay the hell away from me." But it didn't stop. It moved, fast. So fast I barely saw it cross the space between us. 1 second it was still, the next it was lunging, silent, sudden, inhuman. I swung the pipe with every ounce of panic left in me. The metal connected with its arm, a sickening clang of steel meeting something that should have been flesh but felt like bone and stone at once. The sound rang out, sharp and wet. It didn't flinch. No cry of pain, no recoil. Its arm shot out, long fingers curling around my skull like a vice. I screamed, whether in rage or terror, I don't know. but it barely escaped my lips before the pressure started. A forceful squeeze, slow and crushing. My vision flickered. The pain was unbearable, white-hot and radiating through my entire body. I felt something give inside my head, like my skull had cracked. My arms went limp. The pipe fell from my fingers. And then, it screamed. Not with a mouth, not with a face. It screamed into me. The sound tore through my mind like knives dragging across a chalkboard. My ears rang, my thoughts shattered, and then, blackness. When I came to, I was lying on cold pavement. My cheek was pressed against something sticky. Blood. I blinked. The alley looked different now. Smaller, shorter. I could see the exit, just ahead, maybe 10, 15 steps away. But my head throbbed so violently it felt like my brain was being squeezed in a vice all over again. I reached up slowly and felt wet warmth, and then a gash, deep. My fingers slipped into a crack in my skull that shouldn't have been there. I tried to rise, but my legs gave out. Crawling was the only option. Every inch forward was agony, blinding, full-body pain. My elbows screamed. My palms scraped against gravel. But I moved. I had to. I was maybe a meter from the street when I collapsed again. That's when I heard it, footsteps. Normal ones. Then a voice. Hey, are you okay?" A man, maybe in his 30s, was approaching. My vision swam, but I saw him take out his phone. His voice was urgent now, filled with panic. "Jesus, stay with me, I'm calling for help." I tried to respond, but my mouth wouldn't work. Everything blurred again. Then, bright lights. Too bright. The white ceiling, the sterile smell. A hospital. I flinched against the brightness. My head was wrapped tight in thick bandages. Even through the haze of painkillers, the agony pulsed beneath my skin like a heartbeat. A nurse entered, clipboard in hand. She smiled gently. "Can you tell me what happened?" What could I say? That something inhuman had crushed my skull in an alley that seemed to rewrite itself? That I'd fought something with no face and no name? I just stared at her. Blank. Empty. Later, the police came. They asked me the same thing. What happened? Where exactly? How did I end up there? I gave them what I could, fragments of the truth. But their faces told me everything. They didn't believe a word of it. "We found you in a regular alley downtown," one of them said. There was nothing unusual, no evidence of anyone else, no sign of a struggle, just you, barely breathing. I nodded, but I knew they were wrong. I knew what I had seen, what I had felt. Weeks passed. I still wake up gasping, clutching at my head as if that grip might return. Sometimes when I'm alone, I swear I hear footsteps behind me, slow, steady, deliberate. And sometimes I freeze in the middle of the street, heart pounding, convinced that if I turn around, I'll see it again, just beyond the light, waiting. Because the truth is, it let me go. And I don't think it was done with me. I've always been the chubby girl in the group, fat in every sense of the word, maybe more than I should have been. I hated mirrors. I hated photos. And somehow all that weight I carried on my body also settled deep into my personality, pressing me into a quiet corner of life. I didn't grow up with a father, I never even saw a photo of him, and my mom was always working double shifts. She was there, but not really. It left me alone more than I'd like to admit. So my room became my entire world. 4 pale walls, fairy lights that never quite worked right, a bed that sank a little too much in the middle, and my phone. God, that phone was my lifeline. Social networks were my windows to everything I felt like I'd never touch. Friendships, adventures, love. Especially love. I was never the Juliet of anyone's story. No one sent me late-night texts or asked me to meet up for coffee. I had never been on a date, and I was already in my 20s. No holding hands, no awkward first kisses, nothing. Just me, my screen, and my notebooks. Writing was my therapy. In those stories, I could be anything: confident, radiant, loved. I poured myself into my characters and their tangled dramas, their fantasy worlds where the girl who looked like me wasn't the sidekick or the punchline. Eventually, I started uploading my stories anonymously. I couldn't bring myself to add a photo or a name. I didn't think the world deserved to see the real me, or maybe I didn't believe the real me deserved to be seen. Dating apps? I had them, sure. But my profile had no photo, just vague descriptions. I was too self-conscious to share more. I watched those corny dating shows where women twirled in slow motion while men talked about how their hearts skipped beats. It all seemed so distant, so laughable. I'd sit there on my couch, eating chips and drinking soda, swiping through profiles just to mock them silently. I never messaged anyone. I barely read their bios. I told myself I wasn't interested, but the truth was, I was terrified. I had my moments of rebellion. I tried eating healthier, downloaded a workout app, even signed up for a 30-day fitness challenge. But I never made it past the first half hour. My own reflection was a constant reminder of every insecurity I carried. So eventually I always ended up doing the same thing, wandering into the kitchen, searching the cupboards for comfort food, chips, chocolate, whatever numbed the ache. Then one morning I stood in front of the pantry and realized everything was gone. Not a single snack left. My chest tightened with the kind of stress that only people like me understand. The urge to eat was clawing at my insides. So, still in my hoodie and leggings, I grabbed my keys and headed out into the sharp light of day, ready to make a supply run. And that's when I saw it. Movement. Just a flicker in the corner of my eye, but enough to make me freeze on the spot. I turned my head slowly, my heartbeat already quickening. The sound. It was coming from the house next door. That house had been empty since the day I moved in. 3 years. Boarded up windows, wild weeds in the front yard, paint peeling like sunburned skin. But now, a man, middle-aged, scruffy, almost feral looking, was kicking through the wooden boards that covered the door. I stared, unable to move, as he forced his way inside like he belonged there. A moment later, he emerged again, dragging a wooden chair behind him. And then, he placed the chair directly across from my front door. He sat down, faced my house, and stared right at me. No hesitation, no shame, just cold, relentless watching. A chill ran from the base of my spine straight into my bones. I fumbled for my car keys with trembling hands, panic fluttering in my throat. My fingers felt clumsy and numb, like they weren't mine. I got in the car and slammed the door shut, trying not to look. But just before I sped off, our eyes met, and something in his expression made my stomach turn. He wasn't just staring. He was studying me, like I was the main character in a story he already knew the ending to. 30 minutes. That's how long I stayed away. I walked the aisles of the mall like a zombie, clutching a bag of chips and a bottle of soda like they were some kind of protection. I tried to calm down, telling myself maybe he was just a squatter or someone cleaning the place up. Rational lies. Whatever would keep my heart from exploding. But when I got back home, he was still there. Same chair, same dead stare, same terrifying calmness. He hadn't moved an inch. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking again, this time worse. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, staring at him through the windshield. He didn't blink. It felt like I was suddenly trapped in the kind of crime show I used to binge watch at 2 a.m. And in that moment, one terrifying thought took root and wouldn't leave. He was watching me, like I was already his next story. If he had just turned the chair slightly, just a little to the side, it might not have felt so off. But he didn't. He didn't move at all. He just kept staring, unblinking, locked on me like I was a specimen under a microscope. It was too much. I could feel my skin crawl under the weight of his gaze. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I spun around, heart pounding, and marched back into the house. The slam of the door behind me was louder than I expected, echoing through the hall like a shot. My hands shook as I unpacked my small grocery bag, chips, shampoo, a new loofah, and tried to distract myself from the unease blooming in my chest. Then came a ping, a notification. My heart jumped. For a second, I thought maybe it was one of my followers asking again, asking to see my face, to put a real person behind the words. That always terrified me. But this was something different. A new message from someone named Marcus Alex. My breath hitched. It felt like a scene out of one of my stories, like a twist I hadn't written but was now living. Intrigued, I gripped the phone tightly, carried it to the sofa and curled up in the corner like it was my fortress. I tapped open the message. "Hi," it read. "I saw your profile. You seem interesting." No photo. No real details. Just that. And then I saw his profile. Tall, dark-haired, sharp features, almost statuesque. He looked like the kind of man who belonged on the cover of a romance novel, not in my inbox. Elegant, confident, too good to be true. The only flaw, if you could call it that, was that he didn't have a beard. I've always loved beards, but I could overlook it. I hesitated, fingers hovering above the keyboard. Then I typed back, "Hello." His reply came in seconds. "How are you, beautiful?" I froze. Beautiful? I didn't even have a photo on my profile. It was strange. Flattering, but strange. Still, I responded with a line that felt clever enough to mask my nervousness. I think the most interesting people tend to hide behind closed doors for fear of attracting too much attention. He replied with a laughing emoji, and just like that, we were talking. Every day. Every night. He never once asked for a photo. Not once. And that only deepened the mystery and my curiosity. Within 2 weeks, I'd practically forgotten about everything else. My writing, my followers, irrelevant. I was completely absorbed in this strange, exciting connection. Eventually, he asked if I wanted to meet in person. I said yes, without hesitation. He warned me, though. I might not be exactly what you expect. But I told him, that's okay. You're exactly what I want. We arranged to meet at a restaurant on Ridge Road, 8 p.m. That's perfect, I texted. He sent back heart emojis. My chest fluttered. I spent the afternoon dancing around my room to Summer Walker, feeling like a teenager again. The red dress I picked out wasn't something I usually wore. It hugged my curves, made me feel exposed. But for once, I wanted to feel seen, beautiful, wanted. I was about to leave when I opened the door and there he was. My neighbor, still there, still sitting in that damn chair. He had been waiting, all day. I jumped back with a startled cry. "What are you doing here?" My voice cracked. I could barely keep my composure. He didn't flinch, didn't react like a normal person might. "My flashlight broke," he said slowly, his voice low and gravelly. "Thought you might have one." I blinked, stunned. Sure. Wait here." I rushed back inside, rummaged through the junk drawer, and grabbed an old flashlight. When I handed it to him, he took it with the same unsettling calmness as before, nodding once. Then, without a word, he walked back to his house and sat back down, in that same chair, facing my door, still watching. I locked the door behind me, heart racing, and forced myself to shake it off. I wouldn't let him ruin my night. I got in my car and drove straight to the restaurant. When I arrived, Marcus was already there, sitting alone at a round table in the center of the room. He had apparently reserved the entire place. The waiters glanced at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Surprise? Sympathy? Confusion? I didn't care. My nerves were a hurricane as I walked toward him. He looked up, saw me, and the way he studied me, it wasn't like admiration. It was more like assessment, like I was being measured. I gave a half-nervous smile. "I know I'm not what you were expecting." He didn't blink. "No, you're perfect. You're just what I wanted." His voice was flat, calm, no inflection, no warmth. Still, his eyes never left mine. There was something so intense in his gaze that it made my skin tighten. We sat, talked, sort of. He answered every question but never offered anything, never laughed, never smiled. His face stayed frozen, expressionless, as if he were operating on some programmed script. After a while, I tried to make a joke. "Are you a killer robot or something?" He tilted his head, then said, without even the hint of humor, "Would it matter if I was?" I chuckled, lifting a glass of red wine to my lips. "So, are you a killer robot or something?" He looked at me, completely straight-faced. "No," he said. "I'm not that." The way he said it, it wasn't joking. There was something too calm, too deliberate in his tone. It sent a ripple down my spine. But I laughed it off. Maybe he was just socially awkward. Trying to shake the unease, I smiled and leaned in slightly. "Would you like to go somewhere more private?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes." We stood up, left the restaurant in silence, and before I could even process what was happening, he was in my car. The streets flew past in a blur, and soon we were pulling into my driveway. I felt a surge of boldness, or maybe it was nervous energy, so I leaned in and kissed him just before heading inside. But in that moment, a blinding light swept across us. I flinched and turned toward the source. My neighbor, again. He was standing outside, flashlight aimed directly at us. My heart skipped a beat and I instinctively stepped back. "What the hell is that?" Marcus asked, his voice low, irritated. I tried to sound casual, brushing it off. "Just my neighbor. He's harmless, forget about it." But the back of my neck prickled. That feeling of being watched had returned, heavier than ever. We walked up the driveway and I fumbled with the keys. Once inside, Marcus immediately asked me to turn off the lights. I hesitated but did as he asked. The living room was bathed in shadows. Suddenly, I felt an arm wrap around my waist. I gasped, not sure if it was fear or excitement. Marcus laughed quietly. "Relax," he whispered. That night, it was intense, raw. Everything I'd secretly hoped for, wrapped in heat and breath and sweat. I fell asleep in his arms, a strange, overwhelming calm washing over me. For once, I felt wanted. But sometime in the middle of the night, I heard it. A creak, subtle, barely there, but real. My eyes flew open. I sat up, straining to listen. The room was nearly pitch black, the only light the faint glow of the street lamp filtering through the curtains. "Marcus," I whispered, nudging him. "Wake up." He didn't respond. I shook him a little harder. "Marcus, I think someone's in the house." Still groggy, he mumbled something incoherent. That's when I heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. The door creaked open. I froze, my whole body tensed. My hands scrambled blindly along the nightstand for something, anything, to use as a weapon. Then a silhouette appeared in the doorway. I squinted and my blood turned to ice. It was my neighbor, and he had a gun. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. The room suddenly felt too small, too heavy. Tears welled in my eyes and I shook Marcus harder. Wake up, please." He finally stirred, blinking as the figure stepped fully into the light. My neighbor's voice was calm, but commanding. "Hands where I can see them. Get out of the bed." Marcus, dazed and only in his underwear, did as he was told, raising his hands slowly. "Hey, what the hell is this?" he muttered, confused. Then everything exploded into chaos. In one swift motion, Marcus lunged, knocking the gun from my neighbor's hand. It clattered to the floor and the two men crashed into each other like animals. I screamed, pulling the duvet around me as I scrambled out of bed. The fight was violent, raw, and fast. They slammed into walls, overturned a lamp, and the sound of fists and grunts echoed through the room. For a moment, it looked like Marcus had the upper hand. But then, a flash of silver. A knife. My neighbor drove it into Marcus's shoulder. Marcus howled in pain, stumbling back, and then sirens, blaring, getting closer. Red and blue lights flashed outside my windows, and in seconds, the house was flooded with police officers. I backed into the corner, still wrapped in the blanket, shaking. "Thank God," I gasped. "He broke in. He's crazy. He tried to kill Marcus." But the officers didn't move toward my neighbor. They turned to Marcus, guns drawn. "Marcus Alex, you're under arrest," one officer announced firmly. I stared at them, stunned. "Wait, what?" "No, you've got the wrong guy. He attacked us." The officer turned to me with a grim look. "No, ma'am. We've got the right guy." My mouth opened, closed. I couldn't speak. It turned out Marcus wasn't who he said he was. He was a serial killer. The police had been tracking him for months. He had already murdered 3 women. Women like me, curvy, solitary, quiet. He'd seduced them online, lured them in, spent one night with them, then killed them, each one in their own home. It was his game, and I was supposed to be his next win. But I wasn't, because the man I'd feared this whole time, the neighbor I'd avoided and judged, was actually an undercover cop. He'd been stationed there the entire time, waiting for Marcus to make his move. Watching, protecting, waiting for a chance to catch him in the act. The irony hit me hard. I had trusted a stranger who seemed perfect, and feared the one person who had actually been trying to save me. After that night, I didn't go near a dating app for a long time. The fear lingered like a shadow always hovering. But eventually, I met someone new, someone real. His name is Benjamin. He's kind, funny, a little awkward, and very much alive. We've been together ever since. So to all the girls out there, please, please, be careful. The world is full of monsters, and they don't always sit in chairs across the street. Sometimes they smile, say all the right things, and call you beautiful. Sleep is such a strange thing when you really think about it, isn't it? We spend nearly a third of our lives doing it, yet we barely remember most of it. Sure, everyone knows it's essential. Your brain needs it, your body needs it. But that's not what this story is about. No, this is about something far more unsettling. It's about the night I met something I still can't explain. I was 11 years old. Back then, life was simple. I was your typical kid, riding bikes, playing pranks on the neighbors, getting into harmless trouble with friends in the street. My older sister, Sophia, was 15 and in full teenage rebellion mode. She acted like she was smarter, cooler, better than everyone else, especially me. We fought like siblings do, petty arguments, shouting matches, the occasional door slam, but nothing serious. Except for one thing she said that never quite left me. "I hope the red monster comes and drags you to the basement," she muttered one evening, not even looking at me as she closed her bedroom door. I just stood there confused. The red monster? That night at dinner, I asked Mom and Dad about it. "Mom," I said, pushing my peas around my plate, "what's the red monster?" Mom glanced up, blinked, then laughed. She turned to Dad. "Do you remember that? Sophia used to talk about it when she was little. You know, that imaginary creature she swore lived under the stairs." Dad chuckled and nodded. "She said it had fur like a dog and eyes like coals. Gave herself nightmares for weeks." I waited for them to say more, but they just shrugged it off like it was nothing. "Imaginary," they said. Childhood nonsense. That didn't exactly make me feel better. Later that night, I got ready for bed as usual, brushed my teeth, pulled on my pajamas, and grabbed my usual glass of milk. I remember standing by my bedroom window for a moment, looking out into the backyard. Everything was quiet. Still. Too still. I settled under my covers and turned off the lamp. Sometime during the night, I woke up. But it didn't feel like waking up. It was as if I'd been dragged halfway to consciousness and left there, stuck. I couldn't move. My eyes were wide open, staring up at the ceiling, but nothing else responded. Not my arms, not my legs, not even my tongue. My chest felt heavy, like a boulder was pressing me into the mattress. Panic crept in slowly, like a cold hand sliding down my spine. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. My mouth wouldn't open. I could feel the scream inside me, caught in my throat like a swallowed shout. Then I saw it. Hovering just above me was a red mass. Round, hairy, pulsing ever so slightly, like it was breathing. It wasn't just red, it was dark red like dried blood or rust. Its fur looked matted and thick like wet carpet. It didn't move, but I could feel its weight, pressing down on me, suffocating me. My lungs burned for air, but every breath was shallow and labored, and beneath the sound of my own struggling breath, I heard it. A growl, low, deep, like the rumble of an angry dog dozing on your chest. I couldn't take my eyes off it. Every inch of me screamed to run, but I couldn't even blink. I was trapped, frozen in my own body, and that thing, whatever it was just there, breathing, waiting. And that's when her words came back to me. The red monster. She was serious. She had seen this, and now it was in my room. I wanted to scream for my parents, for Sophia, for anyone. But I could only lie there and listen to the growl deepen, shifting into something almost like a purr, a cruel, satisfied sound. It knew I was awake. Then, as if it could hear my racing thoughts, it shifted. Just a twitch at first, a subtle shift of weight. But it felt like the air got colder, denser. The growl stopped. Silence returned. And in that silence, I felt it move again. I thought that if I could just move, just get up, it would all be over. That breaking the paralysis would free me from the crushing weight and the dread. But I was wrong. As soon as I managed the smallest twitch, the thing shifted too, as if it had been waiting. It adjusted its position, lifting its grotesque bulk just enough to lower its enormous head directly onto my chest. I felt it settle there, hot, heavy, suffocating. Its face was horrific. Its nostrils were huge, cavernous pits that flared with every breath, so wide I could picture my entire head being swallowed up inside one. Thick green slime dripped down from them in slow, deliberate globs. Its mouth opened slightly, revealing fangs, long, jagged things that looked like rusted kitchen knives jammed into decaying gums. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to thrash, to do something. But I was trapped in my own body, paralyzed and helpless. I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or try to force myself back into sleep. Maybe, I thought desperately, if I just closed my eyes again, this nightmare would end. So that's what I did. I shut my eyes tight, trembling inside that invisible prison, trying to block it out, trying to make it go away. Somewhere between fear and surrender, I must have drifted off, or blacked out. When I woke again, I let out a muffled, startled scream. It was nearly 6 a.m. My alarm clock blinked calmly on the nightstand, indifferent to the horror I'd just lived through. My chest ached with remembered pressure, and my sheets were damp with sweat. A few seconds later, my bedroom door flew open and Mom burst in, alarmed. "What happened, honey? Are you okay?" she asked, rushing to my side. Her face was full of concern, her hands warm as they touched my face, my arms. Still half in shock, I sobbed out the story, the red monster, the way I couldn't breathe or move, how it had slept on top of me like some demonic pet. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "Shh, you're safe now. It's gone. You're okay. It was just a nightmare." But I didn't feel okay. Not really. Later that morning, I walked into the kitchen, still dazed. The smell of toast and eggs did nothing to ground me. And then I saw her, Sophia, sitting at the table, casually spooning cereal into her mouth. She looked up at me and smirked. "You were snoring like crazy last night," she said, a little too lightly. "And get this, I saw you. You were standing in my doorway, just staring at me in the dark." I stopped dead in my tracks. "What?" I asked, my voice small. She shrugged, took another bite. "It was creepy." I didn't know how to respond. I had no memory of leaving my room, no memory of standing anywhere. My hands began to shake slightly, and I sat down at the table slowly, unsure if I was still dreaming. Then Mom chimed in, cheerful as she poured herself some coffee. "Ah, maybe she missed sharing a room with you," she said with a smile. "So sweet of her to check on you." But I wasn't thinking about sweetness or sisterly affection. I was thinking about that thing, the red hair, the weight, the growl, and then it hit me. What if the monster wasn't real? What if it wasn't a creature at all? What if it was her? In the haze between sleep and waking, had my mind warped her red hair, her constant teasing, and our recent fights into that grotesque image? Had I somehow projected my fear and frustration onto my own sister? The idea unsettled me more than the nightmare itself. Looking back, I realize I experienced sleep paralysis, classic symptoms. But there was nothing classic about the sheer terror I felt, the confusion, the raw intensity. It wasn't just a bad dream, it was something deeper. Maybe it was stress. Maybe it was my mind trying to process the chaos of growing up, of fighting with someone I loved but didn't always like. Maybe it was just imagination. But even now, all these years later, I'm not entirely sure. The red monster may not have been real, but the fear was. And I learned something that night. Sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones hiding under our beds. They're the ones we create, shaped by resentment, jealousy, guilt. The monsters we carry with us, deep inside. So that's it. My red monster wasn't just a creature of the night. It was a twisted reflection of myself, my sister, and everything I didn't know how to deal with as a child. Funny how the scariest things don't always come with claws. Sometimes they come with freckles and a sarcastic grin. It was Halloween night and the city buzzed with excitement. My friends and I were practically vibrating with energy. We had been looking forward to this for weeks. I'd squeezed myself into a tight Catwoman costume, complete with leather gloves and a teasing whip clipped to my belt. Kathy, always a bit chaotic, was dressed as Harley Quinn, fishnets, pigtails, and a smudge of red lipstick that had already started to bleed at the corners of her mouth. Ava, the most grounded of us, had gone full Amazonian in a Wonder Woman costume, golden tiara and all. We had our plans laid out perfectly. Head to Frosty, the club downtown known for its legendary Halloween parties, drink, dance, and just let loose. Trick-or-treating was a relic of our childhood. We were 20 now. The world had changed, and so had we. Our taxi arrived just after 9. The driver was an older guy, probably in his 50s, with a gravelly voice and an awkward sense of humor. He kept peeking at us in the rearview mirror and tossing out weird, almost paranoid observations. "You girls watch yourselves tonight. Lot of strange people out on Halloween. Costumes hide more than faces, you know?" Kathy snorted. "Okay, creepy McTaxi, thanks for the heads up." We burst into laughter. The unease he stirred didn't last long. It was easier to laugh it off. We were invincible, or so we thought. Frosty was already packed when we arrived. Music thumped through the walls and colored lights danced across the sidewalk. We stood at the entrance for a while, soaking it all in and playing a game, guess the costume. I nailed more than a few. Being a nerd had its perks. "That's definitely a discount Aragorn," I said, pointing at a guy with a plastic sword and an unfortunate wig. Kathy and Eva rolled their eyes, but I could tell they were impressed. "I swear that Jack Sparrow's hat has a death wish," Eva said, nodding at a guy repeatedly bending over to pick up his tricorn. Each time he got more irritated, until he finally gripped it in his hands, glaring around like someone else was to blame. We grabbed drinks, neon-colored cocktails with names like Zombie's Kiss and Witch's Delight, and slipped into the pulse of the dance floor. For a while, everything was perfect. The music, the strobe lights, the crowd. It was like we were part of something electric. But then I saw it. A guy, wasted and barely upright, was grinding aggressively against a girl who clearly wasn't into it. Her arms were stiff at her sides, and she kept trying to step away. I froze, my stomach turning. I shot him a look that could have peeled paint. He didn't even notice. "Let's just focus on us," Eva said, grabbing my hand and tugging me back into our little triangle of dancing. "No creeps tonight, remember? Some guys tried to approach us, some smooth, some painfully awkward, but we shut it all down with polite but firm smiles. Tonight was for us. A girls' night. No stress, no pressure. Just the three of us escaping the suffocating grip of university midterms and adulthood creeping too close. That's when it happened. A guy bumped into Eva. Hard. She stumbled backward and caught herself, her golden cuffs flashing in the lights. He was dressed as a medieval knight, but something was off. His gait was jerky, like he wasn't fully in control of his body, and he didn't even apologize, just turned and kept walking like nothing happened. "What the hell?" Eva shouted after him, fuming. "Don't let it ruin your night," Kathy said, looping an arm through Eva's and giving her a little squeeze. I offered to get another round of drinks, hoping a little space would help diffuse things. By the time I got back, they were laughing again, the incident seemingly forgotten. We danced, letting the music dissolve everything else, our makeup smudging, our heels starting to ache, but our spirits still high. Then someone shoved Kathy. It was rough, intentional. She staggered, drink splashing onto her top. We all turned as one, furious. "Watch where the hell you're going," I yelled, pointing at the guy. He was dressed as the Joker, not the funny, cartoonish one. The dark Heath Ledger kind, makeup smeared, eyes hollow. His face twisted into a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Kathy stormed up to him, rage burning through her alcohol-fueled haze. "What did you just call me?" she hissed, her words slurring slightly. Her fists were clenched. She was wobbling. A cold dread crawled up my spine. "Guys, let's go," I said, trying to pull them back, my voice tight with something I hadn't felt all night. Fear. But they weren't listening. Kathy was still shouting. Eva backed her up, her voice sharper now. The guy didn't say a word. He just stood there, eyes flicking between us, breathing heavy like he was waiting. Then, with terrifying calm, he reached behind his belt. My breath caught. The glint of metal under the strobe lights froze everything. He pulled out a gun. Everything happened at once, and nothing at all. It all happened so fast. Eva screamed, a raw, instinctive sound, and stumbled backward into me. We crashed to the floor, our limbs tangled, the sticky floor pressing against my back. For a moment, we were just a heap of glitter, leather, and panic. Then chaos erupted. People froze at first, trying to understand what was happening. But the moment they saw the gun, it was like a switch flipped. Screams filled the air, drinks splashed to the floor, and the crowd surged toward the exits like a living wave. Glass shattered as people knocked over bottles, chairs, anything in their path. The flashing lights spun wildly, painting the Joker's twisted smile in flickering red and blue. He grabbed Kathy. She barely had time to react. His arm locked around her neck, the gun pressed to her temple. Her face drained of color. The defiant, tipsy Harley Quinn from just moments ago was gone. Now she was trembling, her mouth trembling around a sob she couldn't suppress. Tears spilled down her cheeks, streaking her makeup in a grotesque smear of red and black. "Please," she whimpered. The world spun. My mind screamed for me to move, but my limbs refused. I was still on the floor, people trampling around me, over me. My breath came in sharp gasps. The club felt like it was caving in. I knew I couldn't stay down. I shifted, crawling over Eva's legs. "Help me," I shouted, trying to get her up, trying to find anyone who could intervene. But no one came. They were all fleeing. I turned back toward the Joker. "Wait," I shouted, my hands raised, my voice cracked with fear. "Just, please, wait." He didn't wait. Instead, he slammed the butt of the gun into Kathy's face. The sound was sickening, bone against metal. She screamed, staggered, and he hit her again. Blood poured from a gash above her eyebrow, running down her cheek like paint. "Stop," I cried out. I couldn't breathe. That's when Eva launched herself at him. She didn't scream a battle cry or make a scene. She just lunged, primal and desperate, grabbing at his arm, clawing at his face. The Joker snarled and flung her off like she was made of air. She hit the floor hard, a hollow thud that made my stomach drop. But even as she landed, she didn't let go. Her fingers were wrapped tight around the gun. Something inside me snapped. I charged, rage replacing every shred of fear. I slammed into him, both of us grunting from the impact, and I grabbed at the gun. His grip was iron. His eyes met mine, wide, furious, unhinged. He looked like he wanted to rip me apart. He threw Eva off completely, and I heard her cry out again as she hit the floor behind us. Still, I didn't let go. I couldn't. The world narrowed to his hands and the cold metal between us. He struck me in the face. Pain bloomed instantly. My vision blurred, and I tasted blood, metallic, warm, thick. Another hit. I saw stars. My knees buckled, but my fingers stayed locked around the weapon, and then the gun fired. I didn't mean to. My hand jerked, maybe his did. The sound cracked through the club like thunder. My ears rang, my heart lurched, and I stumbled backward. The shot hit the wall, splintering concrete. The Joker froze, caught off guard by the recoil, and suddenly, I had the gun. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped it. Sirens wailed outside. Flashing blue lights spilled through the broken windows. The Joker turned, tried to run, but it was too late. 2 officers burst in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. He raised his hands, but they were on him in seconds. He didn't stand a chance. The next hours blurred. Police, questions, ambulances, Kathy barely conscious, blood matting her hair, Eva holding her ribs pale and silent. I was numb, floating through it all, as if none of it had been real. We all ended up in the hospital. Eva had bruised ribs and a dislocated shoulder. I was diagnosed with a mild concussion, my face swollen from the blows. Kathy was the worst off. Her injuries from the gun and the fall kept her under observation for several days. She looked so small in that hospital bed, the Harley Quinn wig tucked into a plastic bag on the nightstand. What haunted me most wasn't the Joker's eyes, or the gun, or the panic. It was that moment when no one helped. When we were just 3 girls left behind, screaming in a sea of silence. After that night, something inside me changed. The terror didn't fade. It settled into my bones. I started carrying a pen, a knife, and pepper spray wherever I went. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. The world didn't care if you were dressed to party. It could turn on you in an instant. Ava handled it differently. She brushed it off like a freak event, something that just happens. "Bad luck," she said once, shrugging. "Won't let it control me." Kathy took it harder. She started therapy, joined a self-defense class. She told me one day, "I'll never let someone make me feel that powerless again." Time passed. The memories dulled, but they never disappeared. We still went out sometimes, less often, more cautiously. Always alert, always watching, because now we knew. Fun could turn to fear in the blink of an eye, and sometimes survival meant being ready for the darkness hiding behind a painted smile.